Hey guys, how's it going? Well, it's Friday. Hope you guys have an awesome week. I was out of the garage for a little while. I went to the doctor. The doctor's like, I'll just take some days off and relax a little bit. I still have an infection, and it's clearing up now. I'm like able to breathe a lot better now. So I'll probably get back in the garage. Probably, I don't know, next couple of days we'll get started back on scraps. But it's Friday, and every Friday I try to post a video. Some of the cars that I've done through the years, I've done, Mr. Wilson and I, we've done together. And I'm going to show you a car. It was one day, like I say, every one of these are going to start out with, there I was having my cup of coffee. You guys must be thinking, man, how much coffee does Al drink? I don't drink a lot of coffee. I'll have a cup during the day. And whatever I don't finish in the morning, I just sit throughout the day. I put it in my Yeti coffee cup, and it stays warm all day. So throughout the day, I'll just have some. But here's the car I want to show you. Like I said, I'm sitting there having a cup of coffee, I'm browsing, I come across this car. And it looked really interesting. So I get a hold of the gentleman, and the gentleman, he was a little, I'm not going to say standoffish, but you could see he was like careful what he wanted to say to who he was talking to. And I get it. So I was talking to him. Let's call him Mike. I forgot his name. I think his name was Mike though. So I was talking to Mike, and he's like, "Hey Al, where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Long Island." He's like, "Really?" He's like, "Do you know a Mr. Wilson?" And I'm like, "No, it's not ringing a bell." And I'll never say whether I know somebody or whether I don't, because I don't know if that person had a good encounter or a bad encounter, and I don't want to get in the middle of anybody. So I said, "No, I don't." So I was talking to him, and he had this car buried in the back of his shop. And you got to see the shop, and I'll explain everything to you. So, I end up, the guy gives me his address. I said, "Listen, I'll meet you there first thing in the morning." He's like, "All right, great." So I hang up the phone with him, and I immediately call Mr. Wilson. And I explained everything to him. He's like, "Yeah, Al, that's Mike." He's like, "He's a really, really nice guy. He's a little eccentric, but in a nice way." I'm like, "Oh, okay. All right." He's like, "Why? What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I found a car that he's got for sale, and I'm going to take a ride there tomorrow morning, and I'm going to go take a look at it." It's like, "All right." So I'm going to stop that right there. And now I'm going to fast forward now to me driving up there, and I pull up in front of this building. And this is what I found. Let's have a look. Okay, so it's a 1969 Camaro, and it wasn't an auto repair shop. Okay, so now I'm going to rewind back to the conversation that I had with Mr. Wilson. So I'm talking to Mr. Wilson. He's like, "Yeah, I know Mike. He's eccentric, but in a nice way." And he's like, "Al, he's like, he owns that building." And I go, "Really?" He's like, "It's an old Macy's shopping store." I go, "You're kidding me." He's like, "No." He bought the Macy's building. It went out of business. He buys the building, and he uses that building to house all of his cars and all of his parts. He's like, "I got to know Mike because Mr. Wilson, he sells parts, and Mike sells parts, and they buy and sell parts. If Mike's looking for something, he'll call Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson the same, he'll call Mike." So that's how they got to know each other. So I'm like, "No kidding." He's like, "Al, when you go there, see if he'll show you around the building." He's like, he's very, very private with everything that he has. And unless he knows you or unless he trusts you, he's not going to show you anything other than what you want there to go by. I said, "Okay." So I go there, and there's the car that I see. And that wasn't a shop. That was actually the back entrance, I guess maybe of a loading dock to a Macy's, which led into the store. And those cars were actually probably aisle one. I don't know, the way it was set up. So I started talking with this gentleman, and he ended up being a really, really nice guy. And he asked me again. He's like, "Oh, so you don't know Mr. Wilson?" I said, "No, I don't know Mr. Wilson." So he was like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Listen, Al." He's like, "You seem like a nice guy." He's like, "You could see that this was an old Macy's department store." I said, "Yeah." He's like, "If you want, I'll take you around and I'll show you everything in this store." in the building. I said, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, where's your truck parked? So I told him where it was. He's like, just pull up to the back door and they'll load the car for you and everything as I take you through the building, and I'll show you everything that I have. I said, okay. So this is where I went from the loading dock, I guess it was a loading dock, through the building. So that around the corner, like you go up a ramp and around the corner, we go into another area of the building. And he's like, here, take a look at some of these cars I have over here. They're all for sale. He's like, I'm going to slowly get rid of them. And, if there's anything else in here, if you like, just let me know. Maybe we can work something out. I said, okay, great. So take a look. When I first walk around the corner, this is what I see. Here we go. Okay, so I come around the corner and that's what I see. He had 69 Camaro pace cars. He had 68 convertibles, fastback Mustang. He had such beautiful cars back there. Needing restoration. Some weren't bad at all, and some were like that 69 Camaro that I bought. So the whole time, I don't think I closed my mouth once. I think my jaw was just dragging on the floor the entire time I walked through the building. So there must have been at least 20 cars there, because it went all the way back around the corner, all the way in the back and behind me. So, and I didn't want to take a lot of photos or take a lot of pictures because I don't want it to feel uncomfortable. So I wish I was allowed to videotape the whole thing because it was just amazing. Just picture walking through a Macy's store. It was an old store. Just picture walking through a Macy's store and seeing old cars and parts. So we continue to walk around and he's showing me all these cars. He's like, Al, I want to take you to the second floor. So we jump in an elevator, we go up to the second floor. And the door opens up and it was just, it was just auto parts as far as you can see. And when I tell you, he had aluminum head big blocks. He had aluminum big blocks, all aluminum big blocks. Everything, anything you could imagine this gentleman had. And 90% of the stuff he had was all original GM parts. So, I can understand why he doesn't want a lot of people to see what he has, because the value that was in there was just incredible. He's like, yeah, I've been collecting for years, and you can tell. So, he's just showing me all these different things that he has, all these different parts, and I was amazed. I couldn't believe it. So, as we got to know each other and things like that. He's like, something, Al? He's like, I live like right down the block. We can walk there if you want. He's like, I have a couple of cars over there too. If you want, I'll show you. He's like, I have a really nice 67 Camaro that I just lost interest in. And he's like, and it's so close to being done. It's just got to be wired up. It's got to be finished. He's like, take a look at it. Might be something you might be interested in. So I said, all right. So I walk out and they're still, bringing the parts out for the Camaro and they're loading it. And I said, hey, don't scratch my trailer or my truck. They're like, don't worry about it, Al. We won't scratch anything. I said, perfect. So instead we jumped into Mike's car. We drove literally right down the block. We pull up to his house, big garage. And he's like, come on, take a look. I'll show you. So I go in the garage, and sure enough, he had like 4 other cars in there. And he had a 67 Camaro, really, really nice car. But it wasn't really that. I like to find cars that have been sitting forever, cars that people give up on. I like to give those cars a second chance. So that car will definitely have a second chance, and somebody will buy that car because it's so close to being done. I don't know, maybe I just torture myself and I just buy these cars and I just, I get my hands dirty, but that's what I enjoy. So, as I'm talking to him, and he's like, you don't know Mr. Wilson? I said, all right, Mike, I have to be honest with you. I do know Mr. Wilson. He's like, I knew you would know Mr. Wilson. And I'm like, yeah. I said, and he's like, why did you tell me that to begin with? Just, he's like, that would have broken the ice immediately. I said, Mike, I didn't know if you had a good encounter with Mr. Wilson or a bad encounter with Mr. Wilson. And I really didn't want to get in the middle of it. He's like, no. He's like, everybody loves Mr. Wilson. I'm like, I know. I go, but you just never know. So I never let anybody know who I know. And that's funny because I'm going to show you another video. Later on in this video, I'm going to show you another car. And it'll relate to this. And when we get to that, I'll explain it to you. So, so we go through the whole thing. I said, listen, Mike, I said, I'm not interested in this car. I said, I am interested in a couple of the other cars that you have over there. But I go, but not right now. I go, I only do one car at a time. He's like, no, I understand. He's like, listen, if you do that car, if you finish that car, he says, call me. He's like, nobody knows these cars are here other than you or my close friends. It's like, nobody knows they're here, and I like to keep it that way. I said, okay, great. So yeah, it's amazing the people that you run into when you go to look at these old cars. I've run into so many nice people, and a lot of these people I still keep in contact with. So as a matter of fact, I'm going to give that guy Mike a call probably the next day or two just to see how he's doing. So anyway, we worked out the deal and everything was already worked out. So we go back, I pay Mike, get the car on a trailer, and I bring it back to my garage. Take a look what I did to it, okay? Here we go. Bring the car back to my garage. I changed all the body panels, went through the whole interior, put a brand new interior in it, take it over to Mr. Wilson. He gets it up and running, puts the drivetrain in it. Before it goes to Mr. Wilson, I send it over to my buddy Joe. Joe puts a brand new paint job on it, paints it dust blue with white deck stripes. That was a 354 speed 10-bolt rear car posi. Just a cool, solid car. And as soon as the car was done, a friend of mine said, "Hey Al, I know somebody looking for a car like that." I said, "No kidding." He's like, "Yeah." I said, "All right." So I send him the pictures. They're like, "Al, I love it. I want to buy the car." I'm like, "Fine." So they sent me a deposit. Like, "Could you deliver it?" I'm like, "Sure, I could deliver it." So I put the car in a trailer, and that's what you see. The car's on a trailer. I take it down. I take it out of state. I drop the car off, and the last picture you see of it was in front of their garage. And it was just a nice little build. It was a lot of fun, that car. And it was very interesting. It was more fun, I guess, running into the person and meeting the person that I bought the car from. I think I had more fun than actually putting that car together. So that was that car. That was a nice little build. So here's another car. I'm sitting at home. It was cold out. It must have been about 30 degrees outside. I get a phone call from Mr. Wilson. He said, "Hey Al, a friend of mine's got a car. He just picked it up, and he's looking to sell it." I'm like, "No kidding. What is it?" He's like, "It's a car. It's been sitting a long time, and he just bought it just to flip it." So he sends me the gentleman's number, and I call him. He's like, "Al, if you want, there's somebody else that was interested in the car, but he's not going to be here till later on tonight or tomorrow." I'm like, "Well, can I take a run over there now?" He's like, "Sure, come on over." So I hook my trailer up to the back of my truck, and I drive out there. It was cold. It had to be it was probably like 30 degrees out. My son takes a ride with me. So we go there, and we take a look at the car. My son looks at me, he's like, "Dad, not a chance should you buy this car." He's like, "That car's really bad." And you know me, I'm always like, the car was bad, but it wasn't as bad as it looked. And it really wasn't as bad as it looked. So I turned to my son, I said, just look at it for a little bit, just let it ferment, and and just step back, because it's not as bad as it looks. So I work out a deal with the gentleman, and we throw the car in a trailer. Take a look at what I picked up that night. It was 30 degrees out. I wasn't even looking for a car, but I had to have it. Here we go. Okay, that car wasn't that bad. That car, I changed the quarters on it. I changed a few things around on it. I tried to save as much as I could on it. I believe I changed the trunk pan in it. I added an exhaust system to it. It was a 6-cylinder with a standard 3-speed on the floor. And I got it to run. It actually ran really, really good. You can't kill those 6-cylinders. So I ended up putting the whole car together. And I didn't paint that car. That car was actually done in a Rust-Oleum flat black. And that's pretty much it. You'd be surprised, that Rust-Oleum paint, if you thin it out right, it'll lay on really nice and it'll look really good. So that was a nice, fun little build. And it was nice. It was local, but it was cold out, just going to get that. And my son in the end, he's like, you know what? He's like, Dad, you're right. That car really wasn't as bad as it looked. I'm like, I know, it looks scary. I go, but you got to look through the forest, see what's on the other side. So that's what I did. We loaded it, put the car together. It was a fun little build. Now, here's another car that I stumbled across, sitting there, like I say, have my cup of coffee, and I'm like, wow, that car looks pretty bad. But it was so inexpensive. So I didn't even go get it. The price was so inexpensive, I just paid somebody to go get it and bring it back. And when he brings the car back, I'm like, wow, it was a lot worse than I thought. But like I say, those are the cars that I like to look for, because those are the cars that everybody just gives up on and then they scrap them. They'll take the VINs off them and everything, the cow tags, and then they just scrap the car. So, I get the car back in my garage. I ended up, well, you know what? Take a look at this car and you tell me what you think of it. Here we go. Yeah, that car was pretty bad, but it was very doable. I had all the parts. Like I say, through the years, I've gotten so many spare parts that sometimes I look for cars like that just to get rid of some of my parts. So I end up doing all the metal work on the car. I put a 1-piece floor pan in it. I do the quarter panels on it. I put a set of decent doors on it, whole nose on the car. And from there, I bring the car. I didn't hang the nose on it there. So from there, I take the car to Mr. Wilson's. Mr. Wilson puts a front frame in it. He had an extra frame lying around. So he put the front frame in the car for me. He ends up hanging the fenders on the car. And he ends up priming the car. Puts the interior in the car. He ends up priming. He's like, oh, the car's done. I'm like, all right, awesome. I said, can you do me a favor and sell it for me? He's like, yeah, not a problem. So we sold that car. But it just goes to show that car was ready to get scrapped. And now it was actually ready for somebody to start working on it and putting it together. And it was a pretty solid car. The frame rails were really nice. The rockers were really nice. And, it had a brand new 1-piece floor pan in it. So it was really, really solid where it needed to be. So, we ended up, he sold that car for me. And if you notice, a lot of the cars, 95% of my cars I give to Mr. Wilson to sell because I just don't have the time to sell. And like I say, Mr. Wilson's a people guy. And he likes to talk to people. So that car ended up, not much, I guess from the time I bought it until the time I got rid of it, it was probably a couple of months. because it wasn't a running driving car, and I knew I wasn't going to get that car as a running driving car. It was just something to get somebody to the next step to where they can make that a nice car if they wanted it to. So now here's another car. Again, have my coffee. I come across it. This car was sitting in a garage. The gentleman started doing the body work on it, and it was actually pretty clean. It had some dents here and there, a couple of touch-up spots here and there. So I look at the car, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to call my buddy Joe, who paints my cars. I said, Joe, I got this car. Would you be able to paint it? He's like, I told him exactly what I was going to do. I sent him pictures of the car. He's like, I'll bring the car in anytime you want. I'm like, all right. I'm like, how long do you think you're going to have it? He's like, you drop that car off on Monday, you'll have it back on Friday. I said, perfect. That was a 354 speed car. And I just thought it was the right car to finish. And take a look at it and you'll see how it came out. Let's have a look. So I get the car back from Joe, and I added a vinyl roof to it. I did the hockey stripe and the decal down the side. I did all the SS badging just to give it some jewelry, make it pop a little bit. I put the SS mags on it because I always felt that silver with black, the black always popped off the silver. So I always liked that look. So that car was a fun build. Didn't take much at all because the car was so solid to begin with. And like I say, those are the cars I look for. I look for cars like that. They give them a second chance. And the gentleman I got it from, he's like, this thing's been sitting here at least 15 years in my garage. I'm like, okay. So, that's just another car that I just having my coffee and I stumbled across it. And I just wanted to share that car with you. I thought it was a really neat build. And so now here's another car. Here I am, cup of coffee. I come across this car. It was actually very straight, but the paint on it was just terrible. And it was sitting on a trailer. And again, take a picture of it. I send it to my buddy Joe. I go, Joe, listen, if I strip this car down, do you think you could paint it for me? He's like, sure, Al. He's like, I'll paint it for you. I'm like, when can I drop it off? He's like, whenever you're ready. He's like, what are you going to do? I go, I'll strip the car down in bare metal. He's like, all right, fine. If you strip it down in bare metal, bring it right over here. You'll have the car back within a week. I said, great. So I didn't even take that car off the trailer. I stripped that car down to bare metal on the trailer. I dragged my compressor out. I take my DA out. And I just stripped that thing right down. As soon as it was done, I drive it straight over to my buddy Joe, and then I get the car back probably about 4 days later. Take a look at it. All right, so I get the car back from Joe, but before I bring it to Joe, I just touched up the body really quick, and I changed the hood. I had a new cowl induction hood, so it just saved me time. I swapped out the hood really fast, and I take it over to Joe, and he paints the car. I have it back. I throw a set of BF Goodrich radial TAs on the car. The car is still on the trailer. I'm slowly putting the parts back on the car, and a buddy of mine stops by. So a lot of people stop by all the time. Throughout the day, people stop by just to see what I have. Because I used to do a lot of work in the front of my house, and then I had to stop. Then I just go in the garage now. so I can get a little more work done. And I don't mind talking. The thing is, I just don't get anything done. So I end up selling the car before I even finishing the car. And it was actually a pretty nice car. But that was the story on that car. It was very, very straight. Didn't really need any body work at all. You could see I touched it up here and there as I went around. And, it was just a fast car for Joe to do. So that was a fun build. But do you remember why, like at the beginning of the video, I said Mr. Wilson sells a lot of cars to me? A lot of people don't even know the cars. That when they buy them, they're actually buying them from me. So I'm online, just looking around, just browsing. And I wasn't having coffee that time. I just had the phone and I just doodling. I was bored. So I come across this car. Take a look at it. Here we go. That was a 68 Camaro. It wasn't a rally sport or anything, but it had, I remember in the trunk it had a brand new grille, had a lot of brand new parts, brand new taillights. There was a lot of new parts that came with that car. So I bring the car home. I send some pictures to Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson's like, Al, I might know somebody who wants to buy that car. So there we go. I dropped the car off to Mr. Wilson's house. Mr. Wilson sells it. He's like, Al, the car's gone. The guy loved it. He bought the car. It's like, wow. So, did you ever have a car where you're like, man, I really wish I would have kept that car to finish it? That was one of those cars. I really wish I would have finished it. So, that car was gone. And now fast forward about 3 months later. About 3 months later, a buddy of mine calls me. He's like, hey, Al, a friend of mine's got a car he's looking to sell. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, you want me to give you his number? I'm like, sure. He's like, all right. I told him his name was Joe. He's like, I told Joe I'm going to give you his number, and that you're going to call him. I said, that's perfect. So I called Joe up. I go, hey, Joe, a friend of mine told me you had a car for sale. Can you tell me a little bit about it? He's like, yeah. It's a 1968 Camaro. I bought it about 3 months ago. I started doing work to it. It's up and running, driving. I primed the car a little bit, but the back of the car was hit. It had a dent in the back. It wasn't bad, but it just needed to be changed. The back tail panel had to be changed. He's like, Al, I'm moving. He's like, I just kind of really lost interest in this car. You want to come and take a look at it? I'm like, all right. He was about 25 minutes away. I said, sure. I ran over there to go take a look at it. And this is what I find. Here we go. Yeah, it was the same yellow car that Mr. Wilson sold for me 3 months earlier. The gentleman primed it, did some work to it. It still needed, he tried to rally sport it out, but it was missing a lot of parts for the rally sport. So I'm looking at the car, and I just didn't have the heart to tell him that it was my car. I really didn't. But it was a really, really nice car. It really was. Even he said, he's like, Alex, it's a really nice car. I hate to get rid of it, but I'm moving. He was getting a condo, and he didn't have a place to park it. I said, okay, great. So we worked out a deal. I ended up buying the car back. I never told him that was my car from the start. So I bring the car back to my garage and I do all the body work. I changed the tail panel, the upper cowl panel. I touched up the body. I went around. So that was a car, when I originally bought it, I said, this would be a really nice car to paint. So after I did all the body work, again, I get on the phone. I call Joe. Joe, this is what I got. I sent him a picture. He's like, you can bring it in right now if you want. And Joe's great. I mean, I've done so many cars with Joe. It was at the point to where I would actually drop a car off. He would call me when the car was ready, and I'd drop another one off as I picked that one up. I was running through cars so fast. Me and Mr. Wilson, we would get these cars done so fast. And he always says it. Till this day he says it. He's like, Al, you know what? He's like, I don't give you the fleet price. I give you the Al price. He's like, you bring so much business to me. He's like, I have one guy just for your cars. So that's how he's able to get them done so fast for me. So, and he's just a great guy. He really is. So, so here we go. So I send the pictures like, Al, bring the car right in, you'll have it back. This was a Thursday, I believe, sometime around, I can't remember. It was towards the end of the week. He's like, you'll have this car back before the end of next week. And sure enough, I dropped the car off to Joe. I think it took him probably by the end of the following week, actually, you know. He calls me, he's like, Al, your car's done. I'm like, you're kidding me. He's like, no. He's like, come on in, you can come and grab it. The car's all ready to go. So this is what I did with it. Here we go. So I ended up painting the car black. It's my favorite color. It's my go-to color, black. If the car's straight enough, I'll paint it black. And that car was plenty straight to paint black. I didn't even get a chance to put that car back together. The gentleman was going to do a rally sport. He was going to rally sport it out with the lights, but it was just missing so much stuff. And the car came with a brand new standard grille, bezels, new bumpers, everything. So I was going to actually just put all the standard grille back in and all that stuff. I didn't even get a chance to get the car off the trailer, and I sold that car. You know, like I say, people constantly hound me for cars, and a lot of times they're sold before I even go get them. But you know, a lot of times I like to finish cars. But this one right here, it was so close to being finished. A friend of mine's like, Al, he's like, I'll take the car just how it is. He's like, whatever it is. He's like, I'll take it how it is. So we worked out a deal, and it literally went from my trailer, went to my buddy who bought it for me, and he ended up finishing the car and everything. And I think he ended up selling the car, but it was a really, really nice car. So, you know, these are just some of the cars that I've put together through the years, and I have a ton more to show you if you're interested. And another thing too, there's a couple of things actually. Like, just to show you how doable these cars are, I did a lot of these cars in my driveway. I didn't even do them in the garage. It's great to have a garage, but, you know, I mean, they're very, very doable. They really are. That's one of the things that I wanted to tell you, and I say it all the time too. I'm a low-budget builder. I can build really, really nice cars, but I don't like to. You know, I like building the cars, like, you know, with scraps. I like building cars like that. To me, they're more fun. How many of you guys cringe every time I drop a tool on the fender? You're probably like, oh, it doesn't bother me. You know, that's why I love that car. I don't even put a fender skirt on that car. You know, I just drop my tools everywhere. That's what's fun to me, because it brings me back to when I was younger and I used to build these cars when we were teenagers, and that's what brought our attention to those cars, because we loved them so much. You know, and we would take them anywhere. We would take them through dirt trails, everything. We didn't care. We just had fun with them. So those are the cars that I like to build. There's something else that I got to bring up to you. You know, a lot of times you see me working on a car and I stand on that little bucket. That bucket was in a car that I bought probably about 5 years ago. It's an old pasta bucket, I guess. But I use that bucket for everything. That's my wash bucket. It's my step stool. It's my seat when I sit down and I'm tired. You know, it just works out perfect. And a lot of guys are like, you know, it's like, Al, it's not that I'm short. And everybody's like, oh, you're so short. I'm like, it's not that I'm short. It's that everything else is so high. So, you know, it's a running, kind of like a little running joke, I guess. But I got a comment from somebody who said, you know, Amazon was going to their house every day. And then I guess he saw my bucket and he's like, he canceled his Amazon order and he took his wife's pot. And he started working on his car with that. So, you know, I just thought it was funny. Like I say, I read all your comments. It might take me a little while to get back to you, but I read them all. I really enjoy it. I think it's just all part of this ride that we're on. So, you know, and I like I say, you know, enough babbling. I appreciate you guys watching. And you guys take care of yourselves. And have an awesome weekend.